This is going to be the third time now in his 4 NHL seasons that Bedard has missed significant time due to injury, Mike. So do you think that this is going to impact contract discussions for him at all? Because, he is due a pretty hefty contract raise here soon.
I think it could. I'm not sure that the Blackhawks would hesitate to sign him to a max deal.
The Chicago Blackhawks were supposed to be building something this offseason. A foundation, a future, a team finally climbing out of the darkness after 6 straight years without a single playoff appearance. And at the center of that future stood one player, one face, one name that carried the hopes of an entire fan base on his shoulders. Connor Bedard, 20 years old, the kind of generational talent franchises wait decades to find. And now, in one gut-wrenching moment, that future has been thrown into chaos. Bedard needed shoulder surgery. His left shoulder, to be exact, the very engine behind the shot and the vision that made him the most electrifying young player in hockey. And the recovery timeline is brutal. For months, maybe longer. He won't be skating with his teammates at training camp. He won't suit up for a single preseason game. And when the puck drops on opening night, he won't be there either. The earliest anyone expects to see him back in a Blackhawks sweater is mid-November, which means Chicago isn't just missing their captain for a few games. They're staring down the barrel of losing their franchise player for the entire opening stretch of the season. The stretch that so often decides whether a young team stays afloat or sinks before it even gets started. And here's the part that makes this sting even more. This wasn't just any offseason for Chicago. This was supposed to be the offseason where everything started clicking into place. Instead, the Blackhawks made a decision that now looks far riskier than anyone could have imagined. They packaged their 4th overall pick, one of the most valuable assets a rebuilding team can possess, a ticket to another potential franchise cornerstone, and they shipped it off to the Buffalo Sabres. In return, they landed Bowen Byram, a genuinely talented top 4 defenseman. On paper, it's a real player, a real upgrade. But for a team still deep in the rebuilding process, a team that hasn't sniffed the playoffs since before the pandemic feels like ancient history, spending big both financially and in draft capital on a win now, piece raises a haunting question. Was this the right move for a franchise that's supposed to be patient? That's supposed to be stacking young assets, not gambling on immediate impact? And now, with Bedard sidelined, that gamble looks even shakier. Because Byram alone cannot replace what Bedard brings to this lineup. Neither can Jordan Greenway. Neither can veteran presence Ian Cole. These are solid depth additions, useful pieces in a larger puzzle, but none of them can replicate the kind of game-breaking brilliance that made Bedard the unquestioned engine of this franchise. The player defenses had a game plan around every single night. And the numbers back that up. Last season, even while battling through fewer games than the year before, even while dealing with the grind of being the focal point of every opposing team's defensive strategy, Bedard still led the entire Blackhawks roster in points. He didn't just meet expectations. He kept climbing, kept improving, kept proving that the hype surrounding him wasn't just hype. It was real. And now that engine is unplugged, right as the season is about to begin. So the question becomes brutally simple. Who steps up? Who fills that void? Even if only temporarily. All eyes turn to Frank Nazar, a young forward who now faces immense pressure to become a bigger offensive threat before he's fully ready for that spotlight. All eyes turn to Tyler Bertuzzi, a veteran who will need to provide stability and scoring punch while the kid who's supposed to be the face of the franchise recovers in street clothes. And all eyes turn to those very off-season additions, Byram, Greenway, Cole, who now face immediate pressure to prove their worth before they've even had a full training camp to gel with their new teammates. Because here's the brutal truth about the NHL, especially for a rebuilding team desperate to reestablish its identity. The first month of the season can define everything. Fall too far behind in the standings, and even a strong finish once your superstar returns might not be enough to climb back into contention. And for a Blackhawks team that's already endured 6 consecutive seasons on the outside looking in, missing the playoffs, watching from home while other teams chase the Stanley Cup, another slow start could feel less like a temporary setback and more like confirmation of everything skeptics have been saying about this rebuild. But there's a silver lining buried in the wreckage, and it's an important one. Doctors and reporters alike have made clear that this injury, as devastating as the timing is, should not affect Bedard's long-term career. This isn't a story about a career derailed. It's a story about patience being tested at the worst possible moment. Bedard will heal. Bedard will return. The question isn't whether he comes back, as the same generational talent Chicago has built its future around. The question is what state the team will be in when he does. Will the Blackhawks still have a realistic shot at climbing the standings by the time Bedard steps back onto NHL ice in November? Or will the early season damage already be done, leaving this young, talented, but painfully inexperienced roster playing catch-up for the rest of the year? Chicago still has plenty of salary cap flexibility. Chicago still has a young core brimming with potential. Chicago still has time, theoretically, to prove that this rebuild remains on track despite this gut punch of an injury. But theory and reality are two very different things when you're asking unproven players and new additions who barely know each other to hold the fort without their franchise cornerstone. This is the test. This is the moment that will reveal just how deep this Blackhawks roster really is. Not when Bedard is healthy and dazzling crowds with highlight reel goals, but right now, in his absence, when the pressure is highest and the margin for error is thinnest. So here's where we leave it. A 20-year-old superstar sidelined before his season even begins. A front office already facing scrutiny over a bold, risky trade. A young supporting cast thrust into roles they may not be ready for. And a fan base that's waited 6 long years for a reason to believe again. Now forced to wait just a little longer. Can the Chicago Blackhawks survive the storm before their superstar returns? Or is this the setback that sends an already fragile rebuild spiraling backward? Only time and the next 4 brutal months will tell.